thanks so much to all of the speakers who've gone before me. It's, as always, a pleasure, although, you know, quite sad and disheartening at times to hear a lot of what's going on in the world, which is why an opportunity like this really is an important one. And, you know, we're really glad to be speaking a bit about WildEye. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Okay. So as Carol said, I'm going to be presenting our mapping tool, WildEye. But before I speak about that, just for a little bit of context and understanding, because I think where I'm coming from and the work that we do at Oxpeckers is quite different to what everyone else has spoken about. So just a quick introduction to Oxpeckers. Oxpeckers Investigative Environmental Journalism is Africa's first journalistic investigative unit that focuses exclusively on environmental issues. And what it does is it combines traditional investigative reporting with data analysis and geomapping tools to track and expose criminals in Africa, although this has since expanded, especially with our work on WildEye, to various other parts of the world. And Oxpeckers is developing the most comprehensive database of eco-offenses, again, Africa, Asia, Europe, all different parts of the world. And this includes data on rhino poaching court cases, wildlife trafficking, which is what I'll be discussing, as well as water and mining rights. So it really is a massive database. I'm not actually sure how many individual kind of lines of data, but several thousand. And Oxpeckers also works with media partners to tell stories, which is, you know, kind of one half of what is a really unique and I've always thought fantastic way of using data to tell a story and make resources like WildEye and its other tools available to the public. So WildEye, just in case you want to have a look at the tool while I'm speaking, I won't be offended if you get distracted by it. We currently have two versions of the tool. The one is based in Europe, and we have about 500 individual cases, and the other one is based in Asia, and we have close to between 900 and 1,000 different data points on this map. Sorry, what is happening? Okay. So what is WildEye? WildEye is a data journalism tool that maps seizures, arrests, court cases, and convictions of illegal wildlife trafficking or trade. It was a tool developed by Oxpeckers and Indonesia's Earth Journalism Network, so it really was developed by journalists with journalists in mind, but this doesn't exclude anyone else from using the tool, and we are always encouraging researchers, academics, activists, literally anyone who's interested in the topic to try it out. Journalism is simply the perspective that we're coming from. And what we did was we created our own data set using multiple sources. So, you know, public, private, we've gone to courts in various countries, law enforcement agencies, social media, you know, a lot of what speakers who've gone before me, including Katie, spoke about is really relevant, very relevant to the work that we do. And in creating our own data set, we have tried our best to make it easily accessible. And what you actually get with WildEye when you use the tool is personalized access to data. So whatever you're interested in, whether it be a specific species or part of the world, or type of incident, perhaps you are a legal eagle and you're really interested in court cases, you can tailor your experience to see what data you're interested in. WildEye encourages analysis, research, and above all else, all different kinds of storytelling. So why WildEye and why now? The first version of WildEye, situated in Europe, was first created in late 2018. And we kind of had this question of what is law enforcement actually doing about illegal wildlife trade? There was nowhere that we could easily find in one place this information without having to submit requests and speak to different NGOs and organizations and law enforcement agencies. So we created this tool. It became even more urgent and apparent that it was necessary to create something like this in Asia, because in a current post, whatever you want to call it, COVID-19 era, wildlife trade, illegal wildlife trade, is not only a concern for environmentalists. It's important, given the health ramifications of wildlife trafficking, it's important to all of us. And like I said, until now, there had been no single place to access information easily on efforts to crack down on wildlife crime. And WildEye really does try to address this gap by sharing data and publishing stories on justice in action. So what does WildEye actually do? WildEye are, as I said, currently two maps populated with icons containing information about a seizure, an arrest, a court case, or a conviction. And you can filter your experience, so you can search for specific things, either by selecting a category, which is in the top right hand of the tool, and that's one of those 4 different types of incidents, or searching a keyword, whether it be pangolin, scale, rhino horn, ivory, internet, arachnid. You can use literally any search term. WildEye also has an alert system, which allows users to stay up to date. And what we try and do and encourage is for people to track an incident from seizure or arrest all the way up to conviction and the outcome of a court case. So there's no need for you to manually search for these updates. You can rely on WildEye to do this, and you just get an email when we update incidents and you'll stay up to date. So how can you use WildEye? As a journalist or not as a journalist, like I've said, anyone is welcome to use the tool. You can use WildEye to track specific data, patterns, or trends, and these are just some of the ones that come to mind, but the questions really are endless. Where are law enforcement efforts concentrated? And it's really nice having an overview of a map of the world or certain parts of the world to see what's happening where. Do smugglers have a preference for certain routes, which is why some areas of the map are more populated than others? And the big question, why do so few seizures result in convictions? And I look forward to the day where we no longer have to ask that specific question. You can also use WildEye to identify cases to build new stories, research, or entirely new cases. And most importantly, you can use the tool to tell important stories and hopefully down the line affect change. So some of the challenges that we face with WildEye, I thought it would just be interesting to briefly touch on this. The main one has always, from day one, been data collection. Now, we knew that we were always going to struggle to get information, but as time went by and we hit more and more roadblocks with law enforcement agencies and governments in particular, we realized how much more important the work that we were doing in collating this information and publishing these stories really was. And to this day, we continue to struggle with data collection, also just because there's so much happening in so many different parts of the world, and in so many places. You can get this information from so many sources, but often it's not official, which makes verification really difficult. And we do have a process, quite a strict process, that we go through before we add an incident to WildEye, which is to make sure that it's if it's not reported by an official source, i.e. a government, and rather just a news agency or a post on social media, we'll check to see that it appears in more than one place on reputable news sources, or where possible, we'll ask law enforcement directly for more details. But verification is really difficult. Funding, this is a very common problem. I assume not only in journalism, probably for research and a lot of the work that the speakers who spoke before me and who will speak for the rest on the rest of the symposium will experience. But convincing people to give you money to do this shouldn't be difficult, but it really, really is. And it definitely took us quite a while to build up such a big dossier of investigations and of data and information, so that we can, go to funders of all different types and say, this is why this is so important. We want to keep on doing this. And Oxpeckers and WildEye is a really small organization. So we really do rely on the organizations, NGOs, all of our data sources, and more than anything, the locally based journalists that we work with in various parts of the world to get this information and to really push our cause and encourage people to use the tool and to buy in, which is another challenge that we face. People are, journalists in particular, let me rather say, are sometimes quite skeptical to use data. And it's not, it's a really simple tool. It's a really good example of how tech can be simple and very, very effective. In the way it's presented, the interface, it's really easy to interact with. It's very user-friendly. And again, we tell really important, or we help journalists tell really important stories. And through that, we try our best to encourage more and more people to use the tool and to work with our data. Just quickly, a couple of investigations that we've published. A Chinese journalist, Bao Choi, who was actually later arrested for work that she's done in China, collected and analyzed court case data. So in China, they have a centralized database that is available online. So she went onto that and she found cases, recent cases related to pangolin smuggling. And she was able to kind of analyze that and expose how lenient the sentences that were being handed down really were, and kind of showed that this isn't likely to deter illegal trade, especially in pangolin smuggling, which is obviously rife, but any kind of illegal trade. If you're simply going to have to pay a fine or spend a couple of months or even years in jail. But the sentences meanwhile, the sentences in other parts of the world are slowly but surely becoming more and more harsh. So it'll be interesting to see, especially in light of the pandemic, what happens in China in terms of pangolin trafficking. Thank you. Thank you. Then in Indonesia, this story, I really love this story because it's such a great example of how traditional investigative journalism and data journalism can come together to pull off a fantastic story that looks at a law introduced by Indonesia in 2019, I think, called the Quarantine Act, and that prosecutors are trying to use to nab wildlife smugglers. And then there's another story, a really great story from India, by an Indian journalist, Sadiq Naqvi, who investigated the involvement of a nationalist insurgent group in rhino poaching in Kaziranga National Park, which has a massive population of rhinos. And it's really interesting to see how rife corruption is in that area. I just want to end off by encouraging everyone to share share WildEye, go and try it out. We're always looking for feedback and any suggestions that anyone may have. It really is a tool that we want to work for people. So we're constantly adapting it to function best for our users. And there are a few different ways you can join the WildEye community. You can get data. Hopefully my presentation will be shared, and these links, you can actually click on these links and go to these pages, but you can request specific data, you can pitch a story, you can share data that we may not have, and of course just sharing the resource and putting it out there on social media and with your networks will really go a long way. And that's it. Thank you so much. Once again, I really appreciate the opportunity to be involved in the symposium, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.